Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Billy. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home for Nergensia everywhere, anytime. If you go to the website, that is.
Coming soon. I haven't updated the website with the Nergensia dictionary yet, but
sorry.
We're planning on it.
We're working on that. It'll be a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah. So we'll have things like the Hauer effect, the Glenn Close effect. I'm hoping to do some fancy graphics to go with it. So I want to find the most crazy Glenn Close still shot from that movie and put it on there.
Here's what's bad is on Glenn Close effect. We're kind of doing an at our leisure rewatching of Breaking Bad, and you want to talk about the Glenn Close effect? Man, his wife. Walter White's wife,
Skyler,
serious GCE on that gal. It's just like it's major. She's so unlikable, but it's like, is she unlikable or is she just that good of an actress?
I don't know. I've never seen her in anything else.
One role. I bet you've seen her in one role, but you didn't realize it. Have you seen Enemy of the State with Will Smith and Gene Hackman?
Yes.
She is John Voight's, the instigator. She is his wife.
Oh, okay. Wow, that is such an obscure reference.
It's because I just saw this the other day. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Skylar White. When I was watching that, I was like, oh my. So
wow. Okay.
There we go. GCE.
Yeah.
It does not go away.
Yeah. So we'll try and get that worked in soon-ish.
Yes, soonish.
Yeah. Today we will be discussing Book 3, Chapter 9 of Gardens of the Moon, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This chapter is dense, so we are going to split it into 2 episodes. This is part 1.
Dun, dun, dun. So this podcast is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it's not intended to be a replacement to reading the books. Know that Kamraun and I think that this is the best series ever written, and that we will not be providing any critique.
Correct. We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
And a quick warning, today's episode will contain descriptions of graphic violence and is not recommended for children.
Graphic violence today.
I went and added graphic on top of violence, as a matter of fact, to what we were talking about. I was like, there is graphic violence today. Okay.
Yes. It's quite spectacular.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
This is a great chapter.
Oh, yeah. It's good. Chapter 9. The chapter begins with a poem regarding a character that is introduced during the chapter. Quote, "Have you seen the one who stands apart, cursed in a ritual sealing his kind beyond death, the host amassed and whirling like a plague of pollen? He stands apart, the first among all ever veiled in time, yet outcast and alone, a Talan I mass wandering like a seed unfallen." End quote. The poem is titled Lay of Onos Tulan by Tok the Younger. There are a couple of important points in this poem. The fact that he stands apart from the Talan I mass host is one of them.
Yes.
The fact that the host has been cursed in a ritual that seals their kind beyond death, and they are whirling like a plague of pollen, referring to their ability to travel as dust in the wind.
And that weird thing about being sealed beyond their death is, it's not the same thing that I always thought it was at first either. They're not.
How do you mean?
Well, they're not an undead necessarily.
Okay, so from that perspective, they never died, right?
Yes.
They just kind of endured.
Yes, they have been living. They've been living by will.
Right. Mm-hmm. As opposed to when we think of undead, we think of a dead skeleton that has arisen normally,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. Good call there. As the chapter begins, we are taken to Tok the Younger, who is riding a horse across the Rivi Plains. Geographically, the Rivi Plain is north of Pale. It's located in the middle of the continent from an east-west perspective. He's 3 days out from Pale. The scar on his face that covers his eye is itching. He thinks to himself that something is wrong. He should have met the adjunct 2 days ago. He also thinks that everything is going wrong these days. Perrin disappeared, he vanished before meeting Whiskey Jack's squad, and there is a story making the rounds of a hound attacking the second's last surviving mage and killing 14 Marines. Tok is following the signs of a trader's track running north-south along the western edge of the plain. The Revi people that inhabit the plane are described as being small, brown-skinned people. The Malazan Empire has forced their hand, and they join forces with Caladan Brood's Tist Andi legions, scouting for the Empire's forces. The Moranth reports place the Revi far to the north and east of the Revi plain.
Okay.
It must be nice to have that aerial scouting capability in this world.
Oh yeah, and it's I'm assuming it's one of the many new advantages with the Moranth being on your that they bring to the table here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a huge capability, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can change battle tactics on the fly if you know what you can see.
Mm-hmm. Talk raises higher in his saddle and can see ravens wheeling a league ahead of him. This causes him to curse and loosen the scimitar in its sheath at his hip. I wonder if this is what Malazan scouts use, or if they're allowed the flexibility of using whatever weapon they want. When I think of the Malazan military, particularly the Marines, I think of short swords. And I realize he's not a Marine, but right. I was just kind of wondering about that.
I'm just going to assume that they're initially all issued something. And because I think that somewhere in the books we run into problems with, a real world problem of breakage and cheap and inferior weapons, because Tattersall herself even tells one of the soldiers she'll make sure he gets a better sword.
Mm-hmm.
But later books mention soldiers, I believe, kind of picking out what they like. And of course, Talk is a claw also.
Right. He's fitting in as a soldier. Like outwardly,
yes,
he is a soldier, right?
Yes. But he's like, is that the Seven Cities vibe with the scimitar, though? To me, it is.
Yeah, and that's where he came from, right?
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that he was born there, but his military experience has brought him from there.
It's like when they go that way, it's like they become native and they blended with the Seven Cities folks.
Seems that way.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, he's not a bridge burner, but the military that went there, yes, I agree.
Yeah, it's kind of like they've gone native in a weird way and so the Seven Cities officers, they joined in some bizarre melding.
Right. Talk keeps spitting on the ground. He spits like twice in this chapter. He did before he took off.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention something about spitting later on.
Okay, nice.
That's funny.
Talk arrives at the scene of slaughter. The ravens have already begun to feed. There is a smell in the air, something between a smell and a taste. After a moment, he realizes this is due to magic being unleashed. There are 12 bodies on the ground, 8 of them Malazan Marines and Jacatacan elites at that, all of which have been cut to pieces. Here's an excerpt from the Malazan wiki on these elites. Quote, "The Jacatacan elites were a body of Marines renowned for their superior discipline and training. The name suggests a connection with Jacata. The unit may have been based there. They had identifying silver sigils on their helmets, and tulwars and breastplates may have formed part of the standard uniform. Jacata is a city on the southwestern coast of Malaz Island, which is known for its seafaring people, notably pirates." End quote.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Talk turns to the other 4 bodies and finds 4 Barghast. He identifies them through the woad tattoos on their faces. They are from the Ilgris clan, who inhabit the mountains just south of Porul.
Real quick on the Barghast. We've talked about these last time, but did I ask you what you feel of these guys? Do you get that like Germanic, like madmen Germanic and furs and clubs and face tattooing and all that stuff?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, okay. I get that kind of. When I hear woad tattooing, I think of the inhabitants of northern England. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think of like King Arthur style, like when Arthur is fighting the natives. Yeah, that's what it reminds me of. Yeah.
Are they? Is it their island? Is it those? It guys?
Is their island. Yes. Well, I mean, probably not. And they probably came there from. The Germanic tribes came there, right? But then they mixed it. I don't know. But it's an island, so I mean, somebody had to get there at some point. Yeah. Who's native?
Right. Yeah, exactly. But it's like, that's what I love. There's no natives anywhere. People don't realize this. It's like, I'm sorry, we're all imported from somewhere or the other. So it's like, oh, it's too funny. But I was just curious if you had that impression of these guys, because mostly that's because I'm playing Valhalla right now on the PlayStation 5, and dude, you want to talk about you're just like. I think I did not mention this in our pre-conversation, is that there was like an actual you raid, and one of my dudes, I saw something on the beach, and one of my people had cut someone's head off. It's like, what? Okay, wow. Oh, so it's like that amongst these Germanic barbarians that I'm amongst. That it's like they roll like that. So I'm like, okay, it's a pretty fierce game.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm imagining the Barghest are these guys.
This conversation is interesting because one of our Patreon subscribers named T sent me a music video yesterday. It's by a band called Heilung. Have you heard of these people?
I have not.
They basically dress in this way as these natives.
Okay.
And they take deer skins and antlers and stuff, and they make instruments. I mean, they mix it with some modern instrumentation too, but it's like a very shamanistic style of singing. And the video that he sent me is called Norupo. And it's just weird that he just sent that to me yesterday, and we're talking about this today.
Right.
Because that would fit right in with this culture.
Right in with these guys, dude. It's just like, it's right up their alley.
In their music videos, they take cave paintings from Northern Europe, and then they animate them, and they read poems, old poems in the songs, like as their lyrics and stuff. So it's an interesting band. You should check it out. It's called Heilung. Okay. It's Heilung.
Thanks, T.
Yes, thank you, sir. All right, this mention of Porul, because we said the Ilgris clan inhabits the mountains just south of Porul. Porul is a free city located 1,500 leagues to the east of Pale. And an additional thing, we did mention that Trotz, one of the bridge burners, is also a Barghast. So I don't remember which clan he's from. I think we find that out in book 3. There's a little bit of a subplot there for him.
Yeah. Trotz. Trotz, I always smile when I think of these guys, because I think of this guy, we're going like, 1, when he's counting the cards.
Yeah.
1, to everybody, 1.
That's how we're introduced to him.
Yeah, I know it. I love him. Oh, good gracious.
Tok wonders what they're doing here, these Barghists, because they should be 400 leagues to the north, accompanying the Crimson Guard in Black Dog Forest. One of the Barghasts sticks out to him. It's a shaman. The shaman has been killed by a sword wound to the throat. This shaman had unleashed the magic in the air, but none had opposed him. This is odd because the shaman is the one who died.
Yeah.
Tok thinks to himself that the adjunct is said to be tough on mages. Looking around the site, he finds footprints of some Marines that had survived, along with a smaller set of footprints indicating the adjunct had also survived. The trail leads south and west from the trader's track. Tok goes back to his horse and mounts up. He prepares his bow for battle, stringing it and knocking an arrow on his short sword. Stringing it and knocking an arrow on the bow. Oh. I wrote short sword there. Yes, just knock an arrow on the bow.
It's a fancy bow. It's a sword bow.
It's a combo.
Nice. I'm so sorry. You just did that yourself. Did you? Nice combo. COMBOW.
Philly.
Sorry. Okay. Combo.
Oh, wow.
It's like,
oh my God.
Home of the combo.
It's like,
that's okay. Thanks.
Nice.
We've got it.
All right. He will be at a disadvantage on the plains because his approach will be visible to the Barghast. His range has been reduced due to losing one eye. He'll only be able to take 1 or 2 of the attackers out with arrows before he's taken down by their lances. Still, he pursues them. And that tells you a lot about him, going to save the adjunct knowing he'll likely die.
I know it. And real quick, jumping back to something real quick about her being hard on mages.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that we are constantly, I don't know if you and I have reiterated enough in this world about just how dangerous the mages are. And it's just one of those things that it's just like, wow, take out the mages first. Take them because these guys they're very deadly weapons. But
on that point, just look at the Siege of Pale.
Yes. And
the conflagration that the mages caused when attacking Moonspawn, right?
Yeah.
The sheer damage that 7 people caused, it decimated half the city with rubble and stuff. And just how much of the army did they lose? I mean, the barrows were huge.
Oh, my word.
Hundreds, if not thousands of people died. And it was relatively fast.
Yeah. And that's not including what the Moranth got paid back to. But yeah, that's just...
Yes.
That's not including the Moranth payback. But yeah, there's just the fact that we take them out quick. Yeah, and that's worthwhile. Yeah, they are the superpowers. Mm-hmm. They are just real. I mean, they can get out of hand quick. But Talk is definitely super low. I love something. I love him in certain books. Some books, his character is sad.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not going to say anything else other than that. I think you know what I get at. But I'll repeat something that I've said in the last episodes. Even though there's already been quite a lot of really exciting and crazy stuff, like the Battle of Pale and all this other stuff, and the rooftop scenes, I feel like this is kind of where the book really takes off for some reason. It's like, if you thought it was crazy before, it's like you ain't seen nothing yet. This is a great chapter. It starts really ratcheting up. And you're like, it's like, how can it ratchet up? Oh, trust me, it just keeps going. It's like, dude, it's great.
I mean, there was a lot of information dumped on us, right? So a lot of the plot gets moved forward this chapter for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
We are taken to Adjunct Lorne's location. Her and her guardians are approaching a man-made hill. She can see the tops of mostly buried stones at its base and momentarily wonders at what may be entombed within. She quickly dismisses her misgivings. She tells her guardians they will make their stand here and directs the Marine with a crossbow to get on high ground. As the Marine staggers to the summit, she turns to look at the other Marine who had taken a lance to the shoulder in their previous engagement. She is surprised he's still standing. He takes her left and she unsheaths her sword. They only see 4 of the 6 Barghast that were pursuing them approaching. She tells the Marine they are being flanked and to take the one on the left. The 4 Barghast line up outside of bow range. Suddenly, Lorne hears a voice crying out to her right. She turns to see a lance flying at her, followed by a charging Barghast. Lorne drops down and deflects the lance. The Marine with the crossbow shoots and takes out the Barghast charging from the right. The 2 Barghast with the lances in front of them launch their attack. Lorne sees the one heading towards her will miss her, so she doesn't really need to dodge. The Marine to her left doesn't move enough, and the lance spears his thigh and pins him in place.
Ow.
Lorne moves forward and feints, then strikes, burying her sword in the attacker's chest. The toppling Barghast pulls Lorne off balance, because her sword's stuck in him still. She expects an attack to come, but finds the Marine with the crossbow is there to defend her. Turning to check on her other guard, she sees he's pulled the lance out of the ground, but it remains in his thigh. Lorne moves in to help him, engaging the attacker on his right. As she does, an attack makes it past the Marine's guard, and he is struck in the chest with an axe. He groans, and blood sprays the ground. Another swing of the axe from the attacking Barghast crumples the Marine's helmet, and he dies. He topples to the ground, and her momentum carries her over his body, and she sprawls to the ground, dislocating her shoulder. Her sword drops from her numb hand. She rolls on her back and prepares to die. The attacking Barghast is raising his axe to strike. Suddenly, a skeletal hand bursts from the ground beneath the Barghast and grabs his ankle, snapping it in the process. The Barghast looks down at his ankle and sees a rippled flint sword shoot out of the ground. He desperately attempts to block it with his axe, but he's unable to defend himself. It impales him, skewering him, lifting him off the ground as the sword hits his hip bone. Then the tip emerges from his throat. Now, one of our listeners named Ryan reached out to us. I'm going to quote this exactly. He said, "Man, impaled through the taint by a flint sword. Tough way to go." He also added, "If you happen to have balls of steel, you would also catch on fire too." Great one. That got me good.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Oh, man. Yeah, it's like, it's something about this chapter and this is where we're introduced to a different kind of level of violence that he does. He does crowd violence and he does intimate violence, and they're both really brutal.
Yeah, man.
It's like, but this one is always one that gets me, because this is our introduction to this fella with the sword, and he's one of my personal favorites all the way. But yeah, this scene is this is what I tell people. I'll come back to this when I come back to something here later on.
You think of this scene though, right? This skeletal hand, a singular one, right? There's thousands of these guys, right? So, but let's talk about this one incident, and then we'll kind of expand out beyond that. So, it comes out of the ground. You didn't know the guy was there. Grabs your ankle.
Yeah.
You're immobilized.
breaking it.
And then his sword just comes out of nowhere, and you can't get out of the way, and you're skewered.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
Now, multiply that
awful.
by 10,000
Well,
of them. How do you stop something like this?
You pray you die quick.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Because I don't think there's not. Yeah, these are why I love these guys. Not these guys in particular. I love this guy in particular, but I do. This is one of the races. This is one of the older peoples. The Talan. I love the Talan because they have such a weird mystery to them.
Yes, and this is a point of escalation. So this series is going to be measured in points of escalation, and it's a constant escalation.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yes, there's never any backing down.
Yeah,
there's never a back down.
We're just going to ratchet it up again.
Yes, this is a thing that Erikson does that most people don't do. There's an ebb and flow to a lot of writers. He does have an ebb and flow, but it's in conversation and in story building. It doesn't move from point, heavy duty point to a minor point. It moves from heavy duty point to let's talk about what we're trying to understand that just happened, and then let's move to something even meaner. And then it's like, okay, it can't get meaner. It does, and it continues to do so. Book by book, chapter by chapter. It's just he does it. It's
and
amazing.
The scale keeps getting bigger.
Oh,
and you don't know how you can get bigger, but it does. Amazing.
It does. Absolutely amazing.
Lauren climbs to her feet and finds the remaining 2 Barghast are dead, killed with arrows. She then sees Talk riding up on his horse. She recognizes him as a Malazan. She turns to look at the creature that has emerged from the ground. It stands over the dead Barghast's body, cloaked in rotting furs. Lauren says, "I was expecting you 2 days ago." The creature turns to her, its eyes hidden in shadow beneath the yellowed bone shelf of its helmet. The helmet is made of the skull cap of some horned beast. One horn is broken off at the base. Talk rides up and greets the adjunct, then exclaims, "Hood's breath, a Talani mass." Lauren is still glaring at the Talani mass. She says, "I know you were about. It's the only thing that explains a Barghast shaman bringing himself and his hand-picked hunters into the area. He must have used a warren to get here. So where were you?" Talk is staring at the adjunct, surprised by her outburst. He looks back to the Talani mass. The last time he'd seen one was in 7 cities, 8 years ago. He had seen them from a distance as they marched out into the western wastelands on some mission even the Empress couldn't learn anything about. Earlier in the book, it was mentioned that whatever they found reduced their number by half when they returned. This is when they marched off into the Pan-Potson wastes. That was mentioned earlier in this book, if I remember correctly. Kind of just an offhand comment.
I think we're answered in a way we're told what happens in a couple sentences here too. It's hinted at.
You're gonna have to point that out to me, I think.
Okay.
Finding himself close to an actual Talani mass, Talk eagerly studies it, thinking there's not much left of it. Despite the sorcery, 300,000 years had taken their toll. Again, the scale of this, that's crazy.
Yes. Antiquity, real antiquity.
Yeah.
Real antiquity.
When reading the Butlerian Jihad for Dune, those Titans, they were called Titans, right? The humans that...
The Cymax.
They were 10,000 years old, right?
Yeah, yes.
And that was considered old at the time.
That was. That's the longest lived people I had read of in the supposed immortals that I've read. They're usually about like a couple thousand years old,
Yeah, like Apocalypse
like
from the X-Men's like 2,000-3,000 years old, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
So 300,000 years is a heck of a long time to be alive.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's, oh, man, that's a long time.
All right, so the description of this Talani mass, quote, "The skin that stretches across the squat man's robust bones was a shiny nut brown in color, the texture of leather. Whatever flesh it had once covered had contracted to thin strips the consistency of oak roots. Such muscles showed through torn patches here and there. The creature's face, what Talk could see of it, bore a heavy chinless jawbone, high cheeks, and a pronounced brow ridge. The eye sockets were dark holes," end quote. Lauren grates, "I asked you a question. Where were you?" I mean, He can take his time. He's been alive 300,000 years. He doesn't need to rush, right?
Exactly.
In a voice that grates of stones and dust, the creature says, exploring. Lorne demands the creature's name. The creature says, Onos Tulan, once of the Terad clan, of the Logros Talan. I was birthed in the autumn of the Black Year, the 9th son to the clan, wedded as warrior in the 6th Jaghut War. Lorne interrupts him, saying, enough! How long do you think he could have continued introducing himself? How long would that sentence go on?
Oh, my goodness. I'm imagining being 300,000 years old, a couple of years take is not much time. That's not a lot of time for him to say something.
I think we got to I don't know, a couple of accolades, the 6th Jaghut War. I don't know how that rates in the timeline of things, but oh man.
This is how there is something said about Jaghut Wars that's our clue. Not from this saying, but maybe it shows up later in his conversation with her that'll be coming next week, I think.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Lorne turns her attention to Talk and says, "You look grim." She smiles and says, "But good to me." Talk grins and tells her that she needs to find a place to rest. He guides her to a grassy knoll and tells her that they need to immobilize her arm. What, she can't pull a Mel Gibson and slam it into a rock? Put it back into socket? I mean, does that not work or what? Or I guess they didn't have Lethal Weapon back then to teach them how to reset a dislocated shoulder.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. And I'm going to say something. If this is NSFW anymore, I have no idea. But yeah, you said it yourself. Only Mel is capable of such an amazing strength, feet, and masculinity all rolled into one. It's like, I mean, this is a fact, is it not? I mean, I don't know. It's like, I love Gibson, dude. Of course he can do that. He's Mel Gibson, for goodness sake. If he was playing the role of Lorne, yeah, he would have done that there. But
trying to think what character he would play.
He would have, oh my gosh.
I'll have to put some thought into that. We might have to come back on that. I got to put some thought into that.
He could be Dujek, dude.
I don't know.
He's old.
No,
enough.
we already cast Dujek. That's locked.
Who did we cast Dujek?
We did. It was from Braveheart. It was his friend's uncle, or no, his friend's dad, the one that got his hand chopped off and got the arrow.
Yeah. That belted that dude.
I forget what his name was, but we already cast him. That's a lock. Nobody else can play that role.
Sorry.
I better get this money together real quick so I can get started on this production. That guy's pretty old now, so
Yeah. Right? Oh my goodness. I don't even know if that fella's still alive. He looked old then, but I'm sure he was played up older. But okay. But yeah, I'm so sorry. I forgot that we had that guy locked in for that. Oh, that guy's great. Oh my gosh.
Talk introduces himself and Lorne says, "I knew your father, also a great bowman."
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have to do another digression. Have you ever seen Time Bandits?
No.
Oh my word, it's on HBO Max. You need to see it. It's Terry Gilliam. It's one of his. It's his early. It's actually is considered his first film that he directed by himself. I think other things he co-directed with the Python Bunch. But there's a scene where he's working. They land in Robin Hood's time, and Robin Hood is hanging out with these. The guys in the woods. They're really, really tough fellas. They're not just like these real sweet guys that are hanging out in the woods. They're real tough. And as the poor are coming to get what's owed them, as they walk by, Robin Hood's smiling them and thanking them and giving them their gifts. This other fellow that kind of reminds me of the old man, and to some extent, mostly because he smacks everyone down that walks by, including an old woman. It's like that gets her gift, and it's like Robin Hood asks him. He goes, "Is this necessary?" He goes. He explains in some really thick Gaelic accent, and his friend goes, "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid it is necessary." And so everyone that gets their gift gets really hit really hard. I'm sorry, and I imagine that old man. They're the same thing, It's just like when I think of getting hit really hard, I think of those two scenes,
Yeah. Talk introduces himself and Lorne says, "I knew your father, also a great bowman. He was a fine commander, too. The Empress has regretted his death." Talk interrupts, saying, "Not dead for sure. Disappeared."
Not quite dead yet.
He continues to work on immobilizing her arm as they talk. Lauren says, yes, disappeared since the Emperor's death. Tok leaves to get some strips of cloth from one of the dead Barghast to immobilize the arm. He comes back and tells the adjunct he was unaware she had an IMAS for company. Lauren angrily says, they choose their own modes of travel and come when they please. But yes, he's an integral player in my mission. Tok says he has little good news to report and updates her on Perrin's disappearance and the fact that Whiskey Jack and his squad departed without the captain in attendance. Lauren says, damn, and stands up with Tok's help. She tells him to retrieve her sword. Upon seeing the weapon's dusty red blade, Tok says, an Odotarl sword, adjunct, the ore that kills magic. And mages, she says. Tok notes that he found the dead shaman. Lauren says, well, Odotarl is no mystery to you of the Seven Cities, but few here know it, and I would keep it that way. Tok confirms he understands and looks at Tool. So we're going to call Onos Tulan Tool for short. He later tells somebody, I forget who first, that they can call him Tool.
Yeah, we're going to just call him Tool. For the rest of this book, he is Tool.
For the rest of the series. He's Tool, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lauren sees this and says, Odotarl cannot quench their magic. Believe me, it's been tried. The warrens of the IMAS are similar to those of the Jaghut and the Forkrul Assail. Elder, blood, and earthbound. That flint sword of his will never break, and it cuts through the finest iron as easily as it will flesh and bone. That little statement had a lot of information in it.
Yes, it was. It was super dense, and I just glossed over it the first few times I've read it. Yeah, I love that we're breaking this down. That's dense.
So Odotarl is going to play an important role in this series, and this is our intro to it. It protects the wielder from certain forms of magic. As noted above, it has no effect on some of the Elder Warrens. This is also the first time we're introduced to the Forkrul Assail. It will be some time before we get any more information about them, but they are nasty.
Yeah, you said that, brother. With an earned really in front of that nasty. So they are really nasty. So it's just like, nasty. Yeah.
Some of the baddest bads in this series.
Yes.
They're horrifying.
Yes, they
Can't say much about them right now, though.
Yes.
Also, we are beginning to identify the Elder Warrens, Talan, Jaghut, and Forkrul Assail, to go along with the Warren of True Darkness that Animander Rake was
and
building.
the Tist. We've been introduced to the Tist in general. We've mentioned, and I didn't realize this until we've reread it. We've talked light, shadow, and dark. Right. So we've hit all the Tist. Tist are one side of the Elder. Then you have the Blood Earth Elder, the Assail, and the Talan. Who else do we got out of that bunch? Would you consider some of the Fen, the true?
We can't really talk too much about some of those yet because I can't remember off the top of my head what else would be considered Elder.
I think I've already said this, but for some reason I do love the Talan IMAS, and it's probably I believe it's mostly due to Tool and their weird lengthy history I think it's because they're human, and that may be part of it as well. Even though they're elder magic and whatnot, they're human. When you get down to it, they're like older human. There are nomadic ancestors.
Yeah, what's interesting about them is, as we learn more about them, they were almost childlike in their naivete. I don't know if that's... I mean, they're happy people. They didn't seem to have the same betrayals and stuff that we see in these books, and the nastiness. Seems like it was a better way of living. Well, I mean, we'll get into some of that later, but that's kind of the impression that I got.
Well, it's almost like they're a person that is dedication, but has been twisted to some extent by their dedication in a way they didn't anticipate.
Yeah,
they're lawful though. At least they're lawful. Well, so are the Forkrul.
Oh,
they're both lawful. I don't know what they're but the Assailer lawful? Would you just consider them just straight up lawful? I mean, not really evil or good, just lawful.
Was there a lawful neutral?
Like lawful good? I don't.
Waffle neutral?
I don't know.
Waffle neutral.
Oh yeah, it could be the waffle. Well, I asked this because I'm again reminded of the in the Elric series we have Lords of Order and Lords of Chaos, and the funny idea that when they've mentioned that the gods you serve, That's very in the other books that I've read in fantasy. You owed things to people. So yeah, you owed your gods, but it seems the gods are pretty indifferent in this world. You just use their dwelling places for yourself in some weird ways. But I don't know why I got distracted there and moved away from the Talan stuff in the Elder there. But okay, move along, sir.
Talk mentions it will be 6 or 7 days before they will reach Pale since the adjunct doesn't have a horse. She mentions that the Barghast shaman cast a blight on her horse, causing it to die. She had brought the horse with her through the warren to Genevacus. Talk can feel the genuine sorrow from the adjunct when she mentions this. This surprises him since the stories he had heard of her painted her as a cold-blooded monster. Talk says, "You'll ride my mare, adjunct. She's no warhorse, but she's quick and long on endurance." They walk to his horse, and the adjunct smiles, saying, "That's a Wiccan breed, so cease the modesty, else I lose trust in you. A fine animal." Those Wiccan horses, we'll talk about them and their importance in the next book for sure.
Oh, yeah. Remember the growl horse?
Yes. Again with these ill-tempered horses.
I know it, dude. It's Deadhouse Gates. I was just reading up on Brokeface because I thought it was Horseface. It's not Horseface, it's Brokeface.
Yeah,
the
but
guy's name that
it was related to a horse, right? The incident. Yeah, I know what you're referring to. Based on that, yeah.
I love that they're so ill-tempered. Man, and the horses bite hard, man. They can really mess you up, dude.
Yes, absolutely.
I never think about that, but it's like I don't want to be near. It's like horses are. I love horses, but they kind of scare me in another way. But they're majestic creatures.
They're fine from 300 feet away.
Right.
I had one break my eye socket and my nose, so I'm.
No way! Ouch. Okay.
So
whether my God, so you came close to being a broke face. Did you?
I mean, it wasn't like a bite or anything. I hit my nose on the saddle horn and fell off. Yeah, I got knocked out. So I was pretty young when it happened. Okay. The horse's name was Mr. T.
Mr. T.
Yeah. Yeah, I was unprepared for that.
Well, I guess he showed you something. Yeah, I'm prepared for that. But I think they're majestic animals and appreciated from a distance, like bears. They're best appreciated from a safe distance. Yes. Behind several layers of safety.
Oh yeah. Man, bears are fast. They'll get up on you real quick.
Yes.
All right. Talk asks if they leave the IMAS, and she says he'll find his own way. Then says, "Now, let's give this mare the opportunity to prove herself. Wiccan blood is said to smell of iron. Mount up." Talk is shocked and says she should ride ahead without him. She says she needs him in Pale so he can tell her about the occupying legions, Dujek and Tashrin. It's better to arrive a couple of days late than unprepared. Talk complies and climbs up, sitting behind the adjunct. The horse shies and they both almost fall off. They turn to find Tool standing next to them. He says, "The barrow has yielded a truth, adjunct." She stiffens and asks what that is. He says, "We are upon the right path." Tox thinks they are speaking of a different path than the trader's track they were following. Lorne's reaction raised the hairs on the back of his neck. The itch behind his scar rouses itself, and he curses under his breath, scratching around his eye. Lorne asks if something is wrong, and he says, "The price of being blind, adjunct, nothing more." That itching has to be maddening.
Oh, it would be.
Not being able to get to it.
Yeah.
Oh, man, it'd be terrible.
It would be awful. And something I just kind of thought of, and do you think he's some kind of adept because of the way he can shoot, even being one-eyed? This guy sees more with one eye than I see with both mine.
I seem to remember something about the loss of the eye causing him to be able to see stuff.
It does. I remember that kind of
but
bit.
I can't remember the specifics or when that happens.
Yeah, it's because that comes later, I believe. But there's something starts happening here. I just can't remember. But I'm just curious if that's helping him.
Yeah, I think we're starting
shooting.
to catch glimpses of it, right?
Yeah, because it just that kind of shooting.
It's almost like Fiddler with the smell.
Right. That's kind of what I mean. Can you just feel that something is, and he's just used to close enough to see when something's wrong and understand that it is truly wrong or whatever, or that but apply that to a skill set as well. But I'm like, I guess, right. Yeah, just like Fiddler. I mean, they've been able to use their talent unknowingly, naturally. That's the thing. I guess I guess that's what an adept is, isn't it? Someone using it unknowingly, naturally, for the most part.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We are taken to Captain Perrin in Pale. He is pacing and thinking the situation is madness. He knows that he's being hidden, but the only answers to his questions would come from either Tattersail, who is locked in some strange fever, or Hairlock, a nasty puppet whose painted eyes fixed on him with intense hatred.
Mickey Pete.
So, almost immediately before we started recording this, I received an image via text from my mom. And it's a shadowy figure.
It's creepy.
It's like Clicky Feet's head in the background of this picture in the shadows. So
creepy. God love your mama. That's just too funny. I love that. That is unsettling.
Yeah. Perrin also has vague memories of being dragged on cold stones while all strength had left his body. Another vision was of a massive dog, a hound, in this room. It had been seeking to kill Tattersail, and he had somehow stopped it. He suspects the dog isn't dead and that it will be back. He doesn't know Tattersail's name yet. I'm just referring to her as Tattersail, so it's clear for us.
Right.
Hairlock ignored most of his questions, and if he answered, it was with dire threats. Tattersail's presence was all that seemed to hold Hairlock in check. Hairlock references some words she put up about herself. Some of the questions that are bothering Perrin include, where was Whiskey Jack? Had he left without Perrin? What would this do to Lorne's plan? He stops pacing and looks at Tattersail. Hairlock has told him that Tattersail somehow hid Perrin from Taishran when he came to investigate the attack on the Hound. Perrin didn't remember any of that. It was amazing she had been able to perform that action given the beating she had taken from the Hound. Hairlock had scoffed that she hadn't even been aware she was performing the act of protecting Perrin by opening her warren, maintaining that it had all been done on instinct. Perrin thinks Hairlock had been scared by that unveiling of her power. Even though eager for her death, Hairlock was either unable to achieve it himself or too scared to try. Nothing had impeded his ministrations of her when the fever had been at its worst. The fever had broken last night. Perrin now feels his impatience mounting. If she didn't wake soon, he may need to take matters into his own hands, perhaps seek out Talk, taking care to avoid Taishran or any of his officers. He finds Tattersail's eyes are open, and she's looking at him. She says, I heard the coin drop, Captain. The blood drains from his face. Something triggers a memory. He says, a coin? A spinning coin? She tells him it spins no longer, and asks how much he remembers. Perrin tells her he doesn't remember much, and that Hairlock won't even tell him her name. She tells him her name is Tattersail, and that she has been in the company of Whiskey Jack and his squad. She was supposed to be taking care of Perrin. Perrin tells her that she did, and that he returned the favor, so the scales are even. She agrees and asks what they should do now. He's surprised and says, you don't know? She shrugs. He says, but this is ridiculous. I know nothing of what's happening here. I awakened to find a half-dead witch and a talking puppet for company, and of my new command not a single sign. Have they left for Darujistan already? She says that she doesn't have many answers, only that Whiskey Jack wanted Perrin alive to know who tried to assassinate him. They all want to know. Perrin says he doesn't remember anything from the assassination. He thinks there may have been two of them. There was a conversation, and he was dead. She asks for confirmation that he heard a spinning coin. He says he did. He also gets a vision of Hood's realm coming back to him. Tattersail nods and tells him a god intervened and returned his life, but it wasn't on his behalf. She asks if he understands. Perrin says, I'm being used. She asks if that bothers him. He shrugs and says, this is nothing new. She says, I see. So Whiskey Jack was right then. You're not just some new captain. You're something a lot more. Perrin snaps, that's my concern, without looking at her. He asks what her role is in all this, and if she is serving her god. She laughs and says, not likely. Nor did I do much for you in any case. Opan took care of that. Perrin stiffens and asks, Opan? He thinks if they've been in his dreams and remembers a mention of his sword. Perrin walks over to a dresser and puts a hand on the grip of his sword. He says, I purchased this sword 3 years ago. though its first use came just a few nights past against the dog. She asks if he remembers that. He looks at her and he sees fear in her eyes. He nods and says, "Yet I named the weapon the day I bought it." She asks the name. He says, "Chance." She says, "The pattern has been long in the weaving. Though I suspected even Opan could not have imagined your blade tasting its first blood on a hound of shadow." Perrin sighs and says, "The dog was a hound." She nods and asks if he's met Hairlock. He says he has. She warns him about Hairlock and mentions that it was Hairlock's unveiling of the Warren of Chaos that made her sick. She says Hairlock is mad and he's vowed to kill Perrin. Perrin asks what Hairlock's role is, and she says she doesn't know. Perrin thinks that may be a lie, but lets it pass. He tells her that Hairlock has been checking on her progress nightly, but he hasn't returned in the past 2 nights. She asks how long she's been out, and Perrin tells her 6 days, but he's unsure of the passage of time. He then walks to the door and tells her that he can't hide here forever. She asks him to wait. He stops and asks for a reason he shouldn't leave. Tattersall tells him that she needs him because it's not her Hairlock is afraid of. It's Perrin and his sword. Hairlock saw the wound the sword caused the hound and is afraid. Perrin is torn between accomplishing his mission and the compassion he feels for Tattersall. She tells him if he leaves, Hairlock will kill her. Perrin asks about her wards. Tattersall asks Perrin if he thinks Hairlock would tell him how dangerous him and his sword are. If she attempts to open her warren in her current state, it will destroy her. Hairlock lied to Perrin about his reasons for not hurting either of them. Perrin evaluates the situation and comes to the conclusion that even though she is providing him with a large number of half-truths, he trusts her more than Hairlock. He unstraps his sword and returns it to the dresser, then says, "Sooner or later, you and I will have to cut past all this misleading game playing. Opan or no, we've a common enemy." She sighs and says, "Thank you. Captain Perrin?" He asks, "What?" She smiles and says, "It's good to meet you." He scowls.
You know, something I missed on past reads again is just how sharp and self-aware Perrin is.
Yeah, man. I just love how he's genuine. He doesn't like the lying and misleading and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, and even small stuff that you and I take for granted that's not really that bothersome, but at the same time, it's like, eventually you're going to, eventually we'll talk kind of, it's like, quit being misleading and game plan. Yeah. We got a common enemy. So it's like, wow. I just forget how he's just right to it. Love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. Lorne and Talk have arrived at Pale. Lorne says, "This seems an unhappy army." They wait outside one of the north gates as a guard searches for a second horse for them. Talk says, "It is, Adjunct, very unhappy." Along with the dismantling of the 2nd and 6th armies came a shuffling of commands. Nobody's where they were before, right down to the greenest recruit. Squads split up everywhere. And now there's the rumor that the bridge burners are going to be retired. People around here don't like that. Lorne leans back in her saddle, her shoulder throbbing. She thinks that they haven't seen Toole since the barrow, though she often sensed his presence in the dusty wind. In Pale, 10,000 soldiers crowded the edge of revolt, the spies among them brutally removed, awaiting on High Fist Dujak's word. And the High Mage Tashrin wasn't easing the situation by openly countermanding Dujak's instructions to his officers. Yet what troubled her the most was this vague tale of a Hound of Shadow doing battle with the 2nd's last cadre mage. There was a mystery there, and she suspected it was vital. The way they messed up this army is pretty amazing. Splitting up the squads like that just seems like it would be a disaster.
I believe it would be, especially because you get groups that become good at fighting together as a unit and then splitting them up. But is this, my question to you, is this to spread the experience around? So, or are we or is it a bunch of it because they've just lost so many people and we've got other things happening, other fronts?
Well, I think this is pure conjecture, but tactically, maybe what they're thinking is if everybody's sour and they're conspiring, if we kind of mix them around, it'd be harder to conspire, maybe.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's a good idea. That's a very good idea.
Yeah, but as a valuable fighting force, some of this conversation that's coming up here in a minute, they still expect Dujak to be able to beat Caladan Brood and the Crimson Guard, right?
Yeah.
So they can't completely undermine the army. So they're kind of trapped in this situation where they need him, but they're afraid of what could come out of this army, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's a kind of a tricky situation to be in from their perspective. I could situation. See. Yeah. But I mean, the thing is, like, you would think that they would move the command structure around and leave the people where they were. I don't know. It's all conjecture.
It's all conjecture. It's all conjecture, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. How about them excising those spies, though?
Yeah.
Those garrotes doing overtime.
A lot of knives in the night and work there. We've been told about that, but who did the excising? Is that all Dujak's men?
It's the second,
I'm
the
assuming
army.
It's our guys.
Yeah, the forces in the second. They, or I guess the second's disbanded now, or whatever makes up the new regiment, right?
Right. They take care of it. They take care of their business.
Yes, they're taking care of it. Yeah.
I love it.
The adjunct is eager for her meeting with Taishrin and Tattersail. Tattersail's name was familiar to the adjunct, tugging at childhood memories. The city gate opened, and the guard returned not only with the horse, but with company as well. Talk the Younger snapped a salute, and Lorne notes the energy behind it, making her wonder at his loyalty. She dismounts slowly and nods at High Fist Dujek. Quote, the man seemed to have aged a dozen years since she'd last seen him, 13 months ago in Genebaris. A small smile came to Lorne's mouth as the scene emerged in her mind. The High Fist, a worn, weary, one-armed man, the Empress's adjunct, her sword arm in a sling, and Talk the Younger, last representative of the claw on Genebacus, one-eyed and half his face scarred by fire. Here they were, representatives of 3 of the 4 empire powers on the continent, and they all look like Hood's heralds. End quote. I love that.
Yeah. Oh, I do too.
Dujek misreads her smile and tells her it's good to see her too, then says he'll get her a Denul healer. She tells him sorcery doesn't work on her, hasn't in a long time. A mundane healer is sufficient. And I guess that's one of the dangers of that Odataro.
Yeah, I think it just permeates you.
Dujek prompts her to go for a walk with him. Lorne turns to Talk and says, thank you for the escort, soldier. Dujek laughs and says, unnecessary, adjunct. I know who and what Talk the Younger is, as does virtually everyone else. If he's as good a claw as he is a soldier, you do well to keep him alive. She asks for clarification. Dujek tells her that it's only Talk's reputation as a soldier of the second preventing a knife from sliding across his throat. She should get him out of Pale. The adjunct eyes Talk and says, I will see you later. As they walk, Dujek informs her that the nobility are about to be culled, and that Taishrin wants it to be thorough. She tells him it's empire policy, and that he is well aware of that. He glares at her and says, 9 out of 10 nobles to hang, adjunct, children included? Lorne stares at him and says, that seems excessive. Dujek remains silent for a time, continuing to guide her to the empire headquarters. Lorne notes the citizens of Pale stonily eyeing Dujek as they walk. Lorne begins to tell Dujek that her mission will take her out of the city soon. He interrupts her, saying that he doesn't want any details. She needs to do what she has to do and should stay out of his way. Though Dujek's tone was unthreatening, her muscles tense. She can sense that Dujek is being pushed by Taishrin and questions what Taishrin is up to. There was the stink of incompetence. Wow. Lorne continues, as I was saying, I won't be here long. When I am here, however, I will make it plain to the High Mage that his interference in the city's management will not be tolerated. If you need backing, you have it, Dujek. Dujek gazes steadily at her, as if weighing her sincerity, and says, I can take care of my own problems, adjunct. Do what you will, but I'm not asking for anything. She asks if he will permit the excessive culling of the nobility. Dujek says, battle tactics can be applied in any situation, adjunct, and the High Mage is no tactician. He's wily.
Yes, he is. Love Dujek. He's a great guy. Great leader.
Yeah.
He's the best.
Yeah. Before we move on here, this culling, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know how, I don't like it. I mean, I can understand how it would win loyalty from the common man in the street. And it has worked, I think, but it's not a kind of loyalty that you want. I say that fear loyalty is good, but it doesn't last long because people see through it. At least I think.
I don't even think it's fear loyalty, right? It's that bloodthirsty nature of humans, the mob mentality. They're like, oh, look at all these people that thought they were so good getting taken down. They kept us down for all these years, thought they were better than us, right?
Yeah. And so I never really like it, and especially in this scenario where we've already had a lot of death from the Morant culling. And that was just, I'm sure I don't know how they did that, but they had a system. Those guys have a system. So I'm sure, are they the Vulcans? Sorry, they're the Vulcan.
They do have some race. Of that kind of logic mindset, it seems.
Yeah,
right?
Just straight up. But yeah, there's a bunch. So it's like there doesn't need to be anymore, especially here. It's like this city's still on fire, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So. How about you? What do you think?
I'm really conflicted on it because not everybody's Thomas Wayne. For those of you that are unfamiliar, that's Bruce Wayne's dad, Batman's dad, right? And not everybody's a philanthropist, right? There are greedy, miserly people out there, that hoard wealth that aren't out for the betterment of society. So I'm like really torn on it because innocent people are going to get caught up in this. Yes. But then there's also the people that probably deserve it. They're probably doing illegal stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So they're bribing officials, and it's like, I don't know. The good in me wants to say it's probably not right, but then there's that vicious undercurrent that's like, well, they probably deserve it. Is it going to be better for the society? I don't know.
Yeah. Because some people are not. There are some really good folks with some money that are really good people, and they got their money in great ways, but by helping people, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So it's hard to say, and I don't want to be the person who judges that kind of stuff for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Dujek already has enough on his plate with that.
Yeah, I like the way he handles it, though.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's going to be in next episode.
I think next week.
We're going to cut the chapter in half, but yeah.
Masterful.
Dujek and Lorne enter the Empire's headquarters. As they walk down the hallway, Lorne sees guards stationed at each door with hands on their weapons. She thinks the incident with the Hound had heightened wariness to an almost absurd degree. And a thought strikes her, and she asks, High Fist, have there been any attempts on your life? He lets loose an amused grunt and says, 4 in the last week, adjunct. You get used to it. All these Marines here volunteered themselves. They don't even listen to me anymore. The last assassin was so badly chopped up, I couldn't even make out if it was a man or a woman.
Oh, it's so nasty. Oh, my gosh. It's so gnarly, and I laugh because it's so gnarly. And this reminds me of a laughing because of something is gnarly.
Mm-hmm.
Is shooting Marvin in the face in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
It's that same kind of laugh. It's like you shouldn't laugh, but dadgummit, it's hilarious. It is funny.
I remember the first time watching that, just being in shock. You kind of knew it was coming because the gun was right there. But I mean, still, like you could not believe it.
I thought that was not going to happen. But what's bad is the first time that happened, I didn't see it in the theater. I wish I had. But a friend of mine was showing me, and I laughed so hard I couldn't get my breath. And I wanted to see it. He kept showing it to me. I just couldn't stop laughing until I was like, just stop. I got to catch my breath, And it's like I just couldn't stop laughing. So but yes, it makes me laugh, and I shouldn't laugh, but it is hilarious. Oh my gosh! Well,
you got to have an opinion, man.
Oh my gosh!
God, that movie's so good.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Lorne asks if he has a lot of Seven Cities natives in his legions. He confirms he does, and that they are loyal to a fault.
Is that why? Because they're all because they're all chopped to bits like that. Is it Seven Cities loyalty?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, if they're that loyal to him, they're going to take it seriously, right?
Yeah, they don't like that. It ain't funny to these fellas.
No. Lorne thinks loyal to what and to whom. Seven Cities recruits were being sent elsewhere these days since the Empress doesn't wish the soldiers to become aware that their homeland is on the brink of an open rebellion. That news could tip the scales here in Genebacus, and that would in turn ignite Seven Cities itself. Both Lorne and the Empress are aware of how dangerous things have become and know they need to tread carefully to repair the damage. It was becoming clear that Taishrin presented a major problem and that she needed Dujek's support more than he needed hers. They walk into Dujek's office, and Dujek sits on the edge of the table in the center of the room. He says, Taishrin has been informed of your arrival, but will be delayed somewhat. If you have questions regarding the recent events at Pale, ask them now. Realizing he was providing her with the opportunity to hear answers without Taishrin's spin on them, Lauren begins to appreciate Dujek's comments about battle tactics. The first thing she asks is if Dujek has encountered any issues with the Moranth. Dujek scowls and says, "Funny you should ask. They're getting pretty high-minded about some things. I had a hard time getting the Gold Legions, their elite warriors, to fight Caladan Brood. Seems they consider him too honorable to treat as an enemy. The whole alliance was on shaky ground for a while there, but in the end they marched. Soon I'll send the Black to join them." Lauren nods and tells him there are similar problems with the green and blue in Genevaris, which explains why she had to travel overland. I love that the Moranth don't want to fight Caladan Brood. It's great.
I know it. We respect him too much.
Let's talk about this hypothetical situation where Lauren travels with the Moranth by quarrel, right? Mm-hmm. How would she have brought this horse that she cared about? Do they have like a little heavy lift quarrel that like they string up the horse under it and it like takes it off like a helicopter? They fly the horse.
Earlier, something you had read, she mentioned they came by Warren.
They did, yeah.
So, but I'm guessing that whoever opens, I'm assuming she can't open a Warren, but somebody did it for her, and she just shows up because I'm assuming it has something to do with the Empress orders one open for her. And she just travels. Mm-hmm. That would be the only thing I could think.
Well, it was the mention of overland that kind of made me wonder, because I interpreted that as she couldn't be flown; she had to come overland to get to Pale.
And in a way, Warren is overland in a strange way. But because she does mention the Warren earlier, and you actually read that comment earlier. Mm-hmm. But she could have a horse, or her mount could be waiting. Somebody could have traveled there. If she can't travel through the Warren herself, her horse could. Someone could take it there.
Okay.
And she could fly there.
Maybe she can't go through Warren because of the sword.
Yeah, and especially an officer she's an officer. For all intents and purposes, that I'm assuming she has a favored mount, and you get used to a mount's behavior and stuff. Especially these people that fight for a living. Their mounts are used to fighting. I think it's already solved because I remember that we talked about it down here in our notes, but when you read it earlier, I was like, oh, it's already taken care of. She traveled here by Warren, and she mentions it. So okay. She had to come by Warren specifically because she mentions it.
Right, but then she says going overland, right? Complaining about the lack of being able to be transported by the green and blue, right?
Oh, is she talking more about like the army instead, or like more as a whole? As a unit versus a singular?
I don't know. It's not really that big of a deal. I just thought it was a funny picture of them airlifting a horse with one of those
giant, the big giant quarrels. I mean, the quarrels are already pretty big. They can fly. How many folks fly on one?
Maybe they'll get 4 of them, and they'll like do some type of sling between them.
It's not a matter of where it grasps it, mate. It's a simple matter of weight ratios. A simple swallow cannot grasp a coconut by its husk. And I'm sorry.
All right, moving on. Lauren says the Empress suggests they make the most of the Moranth alliance since it may soon be lost. Dujek says he doesn't have much choice in the matter and asks how many legions he'll get in the spring. Lauren hesitates, then tells him 2 and an additional legion of Wiccan Lancers. The Wiccans and the 11th Legion will disembark in Nathalog. The 9th land in Nist and join with the conscript forces. She says the Empress trusts this is enough to break the Crimson Guard at Fox Pass, opening Brood's flank. It took me a bit to find Fox Pass on the map. It's to the east of Old King Plateau, which is east again of Black Dog Forest. And I assume they mean that opening Brood's flank, it's going to be his eastern flank.
Okay. And you know what? And I really appreciate your attention to map detail. It adds a very nice layer. I tend to overlook it in almost every book I read. And even when I'm trying to pay attention on this reread, I still overlook things sometimes. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I also do exactly like what you're doing, but I am consciously trying to paint this picture as we're doing this time. So
yeah, and I appreciate that because it's really cool. It adds the layer that I really appreciate.
And if my descriptions aren't enough, the maps are searchable on Google. So you can, or actually, if you have the paperback book or even on Kindle, I think they have them at the beginning. So, you can just look. They have these maps in there. Dujek tells Lauren the Empress is a fool since the conscripts are next to useless. By this time next year, the Crimson Guard will have liberated Nist, Treat, One-Eye Cat, Porul, Geralt, and... Lorne interrupts him, telling her she knows the list, and affirms he will only receive 2 more legions next year. Dujek thinks for a time, and she waits, knowing he is lost in reordering and re-evaluating his plans for next season's campaign and second-guessing Caladan Brood and Prince Kaaz, the commander of the Crimson Guard. After a moment, he asks if it would be possible for her to reverse the locations of the landings, disembarking the Wiccan Lancers on the east coast, south of Apple, and the 9th on the west coast to Tulips. Lauren thinks to herself that the plan makes no sense and says, "The Empress would be curious as to your revised plans, High Fist." We get a little bit of insight into his tactical genius here.
Yes, absolutely.
He says, "All right, Adjunct. First, the conscripts will not hold Fox Pass. The Crimson Guard will be into the Northlands by the time our reinforcements arrive. Much of that area is farmland, pasture. As we retreat, pulling the conscripts back to Nist, we raise the countryside. No crops, no livestock. Whatever supplies Kaz will need, he'll have to bring with him. Now, Adjunct, any army on the move, any army pursuing a routed army, is bound to leave its supply train behind. String it out in its haste to catch its enemy and deliver the killing blow. And that's where the Wiccan Lancers come in." Lorne knows that the Wiccans were born raiders and would be elusive in the countryside, striking quickly and with deadly consequences. She asks about Dujek's plans for the 11th. He tells her a third of them will remain stationed in Nist. The rest will quick march to Fox Pass. Lorne points out that Caladan Brood remains south of Black Dog Forest, which doesn't make sense in relation to his plan. He responds by saying, "You suggested using the Maranth for all it's worth, didn't you? Well, from Tulips, the Maranth and their quarrel will be staging a massive lift. I want the 9th south of Black Dog Swamp by the time I bring up my forces from here and place them south of Brood. A concerted push from the gold and black should push him right into our laps, while his allies, the Crimson Guard, are stuck on the wrong side of Fox Pass." Lorne asks if he intends to transport an entire legion by air. Dujek says, "Does the Empress want this war won in her lifetime or not? Mind you, it may all be academic. If I were Brood, I'd..." His voice trails away, and he turns to face her, asking, "Will the transport orders be reversed?" Lauren looks at him and realizes that he has just made an intuitive leap related to Caladan Brood, and that as far as Dujek is concerned, it is indeed now academic. Knowing this is something he won't share with her, she scans the map again, trying to see what he'd seen, but it's hopeless. She's no tactician. Trying to guess Dujek's thoughts is hard enough, but trying the same with Caladan Brood is impossible. She says, "Your plan, although brash, is now officially accepted on behalf of the Empress. Your request will be fulfilled." Dujek nods half-heartedly. And all that planning in a short amount of time, it's incredible. He must truly be a formidable tactician.
Oh, man, the on-the-fly adjustment is nothing short of epic. I think he's the best human tactician in the series, at least in this book. And I say human because we have a lot of great tacticians. I
mean, Coltane's pretty good.
Yeah, but Coltane's great. Okay, like
is he human?
He is human.
Think so.
But
yes. All right, but I'll give it to you. Dujek is very good. Yes.
Coltane is better with his group. He's with the Wiccans.
Yes, in that situation, yeah, we saw.
He's a commander of thousands, whereas Dujek is commander of tens of thousands. You know.
Okay.
It's a difference of scale. They're both magnificent men. Coltane is, of course, I believe, the more magnificent of the two in certain aspects. I know we're jumping the gun here, but
we'll get to that next book.
Yes.
Lauren says one thing, High Fist, before Tastrin arrives. There was a Hound of Shadow here. Dujek confirms there was, but he wasn't present during the attack and only saw the mess it left behind. He notes that if Tattersail hadn't been present, it would have been far worse. Seeing the glint of horror in Dujek's eyes causes Lauren to remember the carnage on the coast of Itko Khan from 2 years ago. She says, "I've seen the work of hounds before." Dujek and Lauren share something as they are looking at each other, and Dujek pulls his eyes away. Lauren says, "This Tattersail must be a very capable sorceress." Dujek says she's the only mage to survive the assault on Moonspawn. Lauren thinks this makes Tattersail even more remarkable and wonders if Dujek suspects anything. She is put at ease when Dujek says she called it luck on both counts, and she might be right. Lauren asks if Tattersail had been a cadre mage for a long time, and Dujek says she has been ever since he took command, roughly 8 or 9 years. This causes Lauren to remember Tattersail's name. It's like a mailed fist clenching her heart. She sits down. Dujek takes a step toward her in concern, noting that her injury must be attended to. She tells him she's fine, it's just weariness. He offers her some wine. She nods and thinks to herself, is it possible? She would know when she sees her. Lauren says, 9 years. The mouse. Dujek says, I beg your pardon, and offers her a goblet of wine. She accepts the wine and thanks him. Do you think Lauren was a child during the riots in the mouse?
Yeah, that or a teenager are like. Is she about Perrin's age? I got the idea.
Yeah,
I thought
she was like a year in her 20s.
Yeah, I thought she was a year or two older maybe than Perrin.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, I'm assuming so. She was a young person, and then there. So I believe we'll have our answer next week, though.
Okay. The double doors swing open and a furious Tayshrin storms in. And I think that's a good stopping point.
That's a great stopping point, dude.
We're going to cut the chapter in half. Next week, we'll cover the rest of the chapter. All right, Billy, for standout moments. Seeing Talk in action was cool.
Oh, yeah.
His willingness to do his duty, even though it likely meant his death, is also a great display of his character.
Yes, and his skill is most assuredly something to see in that. And like I said, I think he sees more with one eye than I see with both mine.
Seeing Lauren's skill in battle was also good. It's nice to get a better understanding of her capabilities.
You know, and I kind of tend to overlook just how good of a fighter she must be to be in the position she's in.
Yeah.
You know, she
taking out that shaman.
Yeah.
We didn't see that, but, you know, to be able to do that, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And then I think what kind of interested me was when she sees that lance coming at her and she drops to one knee and parries it. You know, that's a pretty good reaction.
Oh,
there.
yeah, it is. It's fantastic.
Probably the best part of the chapter for me so far is when Tool bursts out of the ground to kill that Barghast. I mean, what an intro to that character.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, this along with, I can mention, not going to mention future things, but in past, when I tell people to try and get them to read this book, I mean, I mentioned several things, and this is one of the images I kind of try and say, just, you know, I mentioned the Talani Mass. I said, you know, it's this ancient race. And I kind of mentioned to my friend about how he enters. So the battle on the rooftop with Crocus and them running from the assassins. And I'm going to bring up something from another series. Eddie fighting naked in the Drawing of the Three. You know, it's like those are things that stand out in my mind in books. Certain things just always stand out, and that's, you know, that ranks up there. And Erikson has multiple in each book, not just one or two. It's like his book is like it moves from, like we talked about, it moves from epic scene to epic scene to epic scene. So how are there so many epic scenes in each book?
Yeah.
How does
escalations?
How does he have the escalations? How does this happen? You know,
I don't know.
But he does it brilliantly.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Always love it. Always eager to see where it goes next. And I forget a bunch of it until we get right on it anymore. That's the thing about it.
Yes.
There's things that run together in my mind because we have such general knowledge of the whole series.
Right. It's millions of words,
yes,
right?
Right.
So
it's you coming back on each time. I keep learning something new, and I just love how we're covering this. It's fantastic. But yeah, that I agree. Tool bursting out is one of my top moments in the series.
Yeah, it's crazy. Our introduction to Oda Tarl.
Yep. Agreed.
That is a critical component of the series.
Not so much this book, but as it's one of these items. It's a bit important part.
Yes.
I'll just say that and nothing more.
Thank you for your restraint.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah. And I really like seeing Dujek's tactical genius in action.
He is
how quickly he reshuffles that plan. Amazing.
He is the man. This is why he's so formidable. You know, he is definitely formidable. I love him.
Yeah. And then when we see the way he handles this culling of the nobles next week, it's great.
Absolutely fantastic.
So good.
It's very funny.
All right. You got any final thoughts?
No, just a great episode, brother. Fantastic episode.
Yeah. Good job tonight.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
We thank you all for joining us today. Again, we really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.